if it's like setting up a different combinations of screens than if I were to be
Yeah.
doing this or just talking to people. Cool. So we are live on YouTube right now. I've got
All right.
Grovertoons here, Mike Grover, the animator of the I Could Give It Up music video for my new song. We never met before.
Yeah.
I've never actually seen you in person. We've never really talked,
Uh,
just over email. So this is exciting. Um,
it's a big moment.
it's a big moment. I feel good about it. How do you feel?
I feel great. Yeah, and congrats on the new single. That's very exciting.
Thanks, man. And thanks for doing such a sick video. I love it. It's so perfect. Um,
Thank you. It was a blast. I really enjoyed working on this one.
so let's just dive into stuff. Um, why don't you let's get some background on like who is Grovertoons? Who is Mike Grover? Where are you from? Just maybe a little background on how you got into animation and your little background story there. How about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a cartoonist and I'm an animator. I live in Florida, which is where I grew up. And right now I work full time doing animation. So I'll kind of two ends of the spectrum. On one end is like commercial work and corporate work that I do to pay the bills. And then I also make animated comics, which are my personal creations on grovertoons.com. And then kind of in the middle is projects like this music video, where it's a paying job, but it's in pursuit of a creative endeavor, right?
Sure.
So I really like this kind of project, getting to work with musicians or indie game developers and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of things I work on. But yeah, I grew up in Florida, went to school in the BYU animation program, and then I've been freelancing for a few years now.
What was BYU? Where's that?
Brigham Young University, yeah, that's in Provo, Utah.
Fun. Cool. So, are you entirely freelance, or have you had animation jobs like in a more corporate setting, or what's your like employment history, my
Yeah,
friend?
right now I freelance full time. I did work in an ad agency for about a year and a half, but before and after that, I've freelanced, and I think that's definitely my preference.
How long have you been doing the freelance thing then, like before and after?
Yeah, so I graduated at the end of 2016 and then freelanced for a year. Then I worked for an ad agency for a year and a half. And then since then, I guess it's been another 2+ years that I've been freelancing.
So, as an animator, I'm gonna guess that maybe you like freelancing more since you were doing it and then didn't do it and then came back to it. But like,
Yeah.
what for you maybe was the like cost benefit analysis between being a freelancer versus having like a maybe a salaried thing?
Yeah, good question. I definitely like the day to day of being a freelancer a lot more. Just having freedom over what kind of projects I take on and being able to make my own schedule and work from home and see my kids more often and all that. But but the trade off is the stability, the steady paycheck.
Sure.
And part of the reason I didn't start freelancing again sooner was just because we felt like we needed to build up our savings before I did that again. And I think that's pretty important if you're going to work for yourself is having a buffer, having a financial cushion, because
Oh yeah.
I'll be super busy and then have a month of nothing, and that kind of lifestyle isn't for everybody, but I found that my tolerance for risk is sufficient that I don't mind, and I feel comfortable taking those kind of risks. And there might be a time in the future where I have to go back to a more steady job, but for now, I really like the freelance lifestyle.
Totally. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I think for anyone, it's just like, do I want that stability or do I want the freedom? Um, and if we destroy capitalism, we probably wouldn't have to worry about that anymore, and we'd all just take the freedom.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Um, so you've got kids? I didn't know that. I had no idea.
Yeah, I've got three kids.
Wow, that's awesome. How old are they?
They are 5, 3, and 9 months.
Good heavens, what's that like?
It's a handful. It definitely keeps us busy. Yeah, me and my wife. But it's great. They're hilarious. They say funny, weird things all the time, and Um, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Constant source of inspiration.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And they're always making their own little comics and stuff. I have them all over my wall. So yeah, literally a source of inspiration. I can start I'll start selling their stuff, you know? It's
Just get them working for you.
yeah, yeah, that's right. We'll set up a little Grovertoons sweatshop of,
Yeah.
of
You
comics.
you call that a walk animation?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So other than this video, what sort of stuff have you been working on like lately?
Yeah, so my latest big project is a comic on my website called Deeply Dave. And it's an animated comic, so a bunch of animated GIFs stitched together
Yep.
about a deep sea diver. And this one was fun. I really tried to play to the format, so it's like a vertically scrolling comic that you look on your phone, and so
Cool.
having a deep sea diver where you're kind of following him down into the ocean seemed fitting. And then we also I worked with a programmer and a musician on this one to put together an adaptive soundtrack, which was exciting.
Ooh,
So as you scroll through the comic, the music changes to match what you're looking at.
that's cool.
Yeah, so trying out some new stuff, and it's been really fun.
How did you sort out the technical? Like, I'm trying to imagine how that would work. Uh, were you coming into it with this idea of like how the music should flow, or was that more of a collaborative, like try to figure it out? How does the music work?
Yeah, it was a give and take with the guys I was working with. So I wrote the comic and put that together, and then I came up with the mood for each section,
Sure.
and then I gave that to the musician, and he put together these cool, moody synthesizer tracks that would kind of match each of those tonally. So that was Eric Robertson, the musician who did that, and then my developer Andrew Jensen, he wrote some really smart CSS and JavaScript, so that it would, when you got to a certain panel, it would trigger the music changing in the background.
That's cool. Is it? I haven't seen this one. I haven't been on your website for a little while since I was like looking at your stuff to work on the video. So this is a more recent thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I just launched this one about a month ago, and I'll be putting up new episodes every few months.
I'll have to check that out. I'm interested in seeing how the music would flow like that. I think that there's a lot of room for experimentation. Like people are kind of crossing borders like that more now with just combining music or animations with comics and stuff like that. Um, yeah, just because of
Totally.
maybe just because more people are animating for YouTube memes or TikTok or whatever. That's cool, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Yeah, and the technology is so accessible now.
yeah,
So
totally.
it's a lot easier to try those things out than it used to
Um, are you're no longer on Instagram, eh?
be. No, I deleted my Instagram.
I saw you post about it and I was like, I wonder if that's just a thing he's saying. And then I like was trying to tag you and stuff, and I was like, oh, he's gone.
Yeah, I mean it's very fitting for the theme of your song, right?
Yeah, it's good. Some good came out of it.
Yeah.
The thing about
Yeah.
releasing when I'm releasing
Go
a
ahead.
song, like I'm more on my phone than I've ever been. So it's kind of this like promoting a song about being on my phone and like 24 hours a day, just like I wake up thinking about like, what if I tried this on TikTok? Like, would that get people to listen to it? It's
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I get
so
that for sure.
I'm glad that one of us got out anyway.
Yeah, for now, and I might go back to it because it's definitely a gamble as far as self promotion. But it's kind of an experiment for me too to see what happens if there is some kind of artificial scarcity where I'm not just plugging myself all over the place. Like if people are really interested in it, then they have to come to the website. So maybe it'll result in a smaller audience, but my hope is that it might be one that's more invested. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing the same thing. Like my old music was more sort of like wide funnel pop music, and now it's like it's a
Mm,
little more specialized. But I'm hoping for pretty much the same thing, that it'll uh, just get people who like it to be more invested in it than if it's just some generic pop music type thing. So yeah,
yeah,
same kind of
absolutely.
deal.
I think it's a good move. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it too. And all the music I listen to is like now when I find new people following me and I like go and see other people that they're following, it's like people that I listen to. So I think that's more of a
Hmm.
compliment than if they're like, following Diplo and Skrillex and Zed or whoever. Like, yeah, it's just more
Sure.
more my jam. Uh,
Yeah, and you have more of an opportunity to like build a relationship with those people or
yeah,
build some rapport.
yeah, um, yeah. It's just more my world. So, just a couple more things before we talk about the video here, just to get some background. Uh, I found you on a website called Creative Commission.
Yeah.
Um, And so the idea with Creative Commission is that I can post some little creative brief. In this case, it was like my character here is like scrolling on his phone. Phone gets irritated with being overused, comes to life, seeks revenge, chases him through a bunch of worlds, catches him at the end, and walks into the sunset with him in his pocket and this role reversal thing. And so you apply to that, and a few other people apply to that. And I really liked sort of the um, almost a mixed media approach that you've got in your animation and like across your work. And I thought that that would play well in the like multiple universe thing. So I'm so glad we picked you because it was so easy working with you, and you were like on budget, and like you submitted the final video before you said you were going to. It was a treat. So what was your?
Okay.
So I'm just curious, like you've got your like GIF comics, and you've got like corporate work and freelance stuff. So how has your experience been as an animator recently? Like with stuff like Creative Commission, or with stuff like when you do corporate work, like where does that work come from? Because I just asked because there's a number of people following me now who a song of mine went, or a song of mine got remixed years ago, and it turned into this
Yeah.
animation meme on YouTube. So there's a number of like animators and young animators and aspiring animators like following me now. So just
Cool.
with stuff like Creative Commission, or stuff like getting paying commission work, corporate stuff, even, what's that experience been like for you in the very recent climate of whatever that is?
Yeah. Yeah, Creative Commission is cool because it's specific, that it's musicians pitching instead of just anybody.
Okay,
So that attracted me to the platform. But like other job boards of that type, it is pretty saturated, I think, with applicants.
sure.
And so I've applied to a lot of jobs on that, but this video was the only one I got
Oh,
actually
interesting.
through a Creative Commission. Yeah, yeah, I would get shortlisted occasionally, or I would get messages from people, but that was the only one that actually turned into a paying job. So most of my work is through word of mouth. So kind of snowballing from when I was first starting out, like with part-time graphic design jobs or with people I knew from school. Those led slowly to occasional freelance gigs, and then each of those has kind of led to additional jobs, and that's been the main thing. I've played around with other ways to promote myself, and some work better than others, but the main thing has been word of mouth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I was coming out of school, I tried to do like a film scoring thing, and it's sort of like a similar. It's basically commission work where like directors will come to you and like, we need this much music, we need it, and they'll describe the music they need and where it has to be and stuff. And it's exactly the same thing. Like they tell you just like, go meet some film students or something. Like just word of mouth is so much of it. Like I got work doing that out of teaching piano lessons. Like
Yeah.
one of the kids that I was teaching, his dad was like, ended up making, he was like a director or something, or an editor or something like that, and was working on this show. And they just needed some like little 8-bit stings, just for like between scenes and stuff. And the show ended up getting picked up by the Family Channel.
Wow.
And they got like, it was called In My Parents' Garage, and it was like just these kids kind of messing with technology and video games especially. And they ended up like Adam Sandler was on the show, and they like interviewed the president of Nintendo Japan. And
Yeah.
apparently he got mad at the kid for saying Pokemon wrong, because it's like, and he'd be like, no, we got to stop the interview, like it's Pokemon, why are they saying Pokemon? Like it's, but those I did maybe
That's
like,
hilarious. Yeah.
I ended up doing maybe like 12 seconds of audio if you strung them all together, because they were each like 1 or 2 seconds long. And like I still get royalties from that. And it's just, word of,
Wow.
yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, and they tell you like people get it when you go to like a lot of film composers will go to LA because there's lots of work there. And there's stories of people like getting in a car accident, and instead of getting insurance involved, they get hired to score a movie. So it's
Yeah.
totally like word of mouth is super important, and like people are out there and they know about you, and even if they're not, working directly with you, will pass you along, and meeting people, and people like move between companies and stuff. So yeah, Super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was wondering what your experience was on the other side of Creative Commission. Like, did you get a lot of applicants when you posted that job?
Uh, I think we got like a half dozen maybe or something. But I yeah,
Not as much as I would have guessed.
yeah. Well, so I didn't know about the site. It was Sarah, my manager, who was like, "Hey, we should try the site Creative Commission," and I was very much like, I was kind of expecting what you described. Like I expected it just to be kind of like very low tier and very oversaturated. So, if anyone applied, it would be stuff that was like kind of, whatever. Typically when I find illustrators or animators, I'm like doing a deep dive on Instagram or like just Google search or something just to try to find something that I really like that I can afford. But yeah, when
Yeah.
you applied, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is perfect. Like the colors are nice and saturated and everything's really clean looking and yeah, and the mixed media thing was like, yeah, this could be like a really fun way to do like a multiverse sort of type deal with the video. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised with Creative Commission.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I'll try it out again then, because that's good to hear that it wasn't like a flood. Because I never know when I apply. Like, am I competing with 100 people right now on this job? Um, and most of the jobs on there aren't things where I feel like, oh yeah, my style would fit. But with your job, when you put that up, I saw that brief and I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I could nail this one. I hope I get this one.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it worked out. It worked out for both of us, honestly.
Definitely.
Uh, cool. I got one more thing that I kind of want to get from you before we talk about the video, and that's just about inspiration as a creative.
Mm.
Uh, I illustrate a little bit, but definitely not enough to kind of have a sense of like a long-term workflow. What sort of stuff do you go to for inspiration? Like how do you keep the job fresh? Because it's so easy to get into habits with creating stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I mean, I definitely love looking at animated movies and films. I love Miyazaki movies. I love, cartoons, Adventure Time, Homestar Runner, all that stuff. Old comic strips. So, I definitely have a steady drip of that kind of stuff. But then also, I think sometimes it's helpful to look at old stuff. I like how with this video, with the artwork, you were having us look at like 30s style animation because sometimes I think things that have gone out of mainstream fashion then feel fresh when you bring them back.
Sure.
Um, so that can be cool. Like I found some old Sunday newspaper comic strips, Little Nemo and Slumberland by Winsor McKay, and there's just some trippy, surreal stuff in that, and it's just not what most people aren't really familiar with it.
You
So
say
I think that kind of thing can be a good source of inspiration.
you say Little Nemo in Slumberland?
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So yeah, I think that can be good. That can be helpful. Because it feels like on the internet that we're all in our own separate little cubbies, but I think more than we realize, we're all kind of consuming the same broad ideas.
Yeah.
Like when we were naming our kids, we would be trying to think of baby names, right? And we would think of a name and be like, oh, that's a cool name. Like I don't know anybody with that name. That's a unique original name. And then we would look at trending baby names and it would be like number three. You know,
Damn.
and it's like I don't even know how that's possible, but somehow we're all kind of absorbing the same media and the same trends. So it can be tough, I think, to break out of that and find something that truly feels fresh.
Yeah, it's so difficult to tell too, like, because, we all have a vague sense that there's like stuff being served to us based on who we are. But it's
Mm.
like, it's hard to tell how much of it is because of that and how much of it is just because we're all kind of on the same general page. And maybe there's like two or
Yeah,
three pages at play where there's like one group of people and then there's the group of people that hates that group of people and then there's maybe some people in between or what. It's hard to tell, but yeah, it definitely feels like these broad strokes of like cultural stuff. That's interesting you said looking at 1930 stuff in the Little Nemo and Slumberland and just like looking at old stuff for inspiration. I've been doing that a little bit recently. Like I've been reading these really really like 1,000 2,000 year old books and it's just
cool.
interesting. I read 1001 Arabian Nights recently and
Mm.
I expected it to be kind of like maybe biblical in a sense of just like being kind of simple. There's a moral to it, little parable type stories, and it was just it was so bizarre. Every story is like,
Yeah.
so I'm like cooking some fish, right? And the wall opens up and a genie comes out and talks to the fish, and the fish respond, and she burns them and goes back into the wall, and it closes. And you're like people pet. The whole pretense of this book is these stories have been passed down for hundreds or thousands of years and eventually were compiled into a book. And so it's like, I expect these stories to be the sort of thing that a person could casually remember. But
Yeah.
they're like, 80-page long. Like, what, where is this going? I have no idea. And so it kind of it flips on its head, like this notion of, uh, like there's like the Pixar story formula. Have you read?
Yeah.
There's a book. It's like Save the Cat or something like that.
Yeah. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So like these formulas, and there's the same thing in music. Like there's the pop formulas, like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and we have these
Yeah.
things that kind of work. But if you look at really old stuff, like they didn't have any of that stuff worked out, and so they were
Mm.
just like, then this wild thing happened, and then this next wild thing happened, and like it's so gripping in a way that is very unconventional by modern standards. So
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, yeah. It can feel kind of dreamlike, right? When you
yeah,
tap into some of that old stuff.
yeah. So I love that. I love that you said looking at old stuff for inspiration, because I feel exactly the same. Because we're all so oversaturated by what's happening now, but there's like thousands of years of inspiration to draw on. Uh,
Yeah,
why don't we talk about the video a little bit?
let's do it.
Um, boo boo boo. I think we've already covered a couple of my questions here, so I'm just going to skim this real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm not going to ask about Creative Commission. We talked about that. Uh, let's talk specifically about the video. What was your, I mean, I know, but for the sake of everyone else, what was your approach like when we started working on this video? How did it go from an idea of this thing that we were going to do into being something that was real?
Yeah, so it was a really ideal scenario because you provided for me a structure, a structure and a basic idea, but it was an idea where there was a lot of room for experimentation and creativity. And then you also had that great album art by Romain Despenas. Is that how you
Yeah.
say it?
I think it's like Roman is the English version
Okay,
of it.
Roman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. So great album artwork to start with, and then you had this structure with a beginning, middle, and an end. But then the middle was really open for interpretation, right? Where
Sure.
we're going to have these guys running through all these different settings, but we can kind of pick what we want those settings to be.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so I looked at the album art and kind of streamlined those characters a little bit so that it would work in animation.
Yeah.
And then it was just a matter of zeroing in on what these settings are going to be that we would have him running through. And what's great was that structure also allowed for a lot of remixing. It's very modular.
Yeah.
If you have this running animation that I can reuse over and over again. And then we were swapping out the different types of characters with the different types of backgrounds, and so that was good for a music video in particular because how is the song 3 minutes? Is that about how long it is?
Yeah. It's a couple seconds less. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of time to fill with animation. But because we had this format, then we were able to mix and match and fill the time in a way that didn't feel, too static.
Yeah. And so then I guess the whole process was basically just then creating the characters and creating the backgrounds to mix them or to fit them, and then just remixing those in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah. So compared to other projects like this, it was pretty fast, I'd say. I was able to, I did some rough storyboards. I remember one of your notes was to make all the characters like a little weirder and creepier, which was that was a refreshing note to get because that's I never hear that when I'm working for some corporation on their
Right.
YouTube commercial.
Yeah.
So that was fun, and then after that we just jumped right into animation.
Yeah. There were a few things like the Scooby Doo thing, like played so well into having all the characters too, because you could just have like all these variations running around between doors together.
Yeah, yeah, that turned out perfect.
Um, do 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 the video. I should have made these notes shorter.
Ah,
So there is a, I mean, how do you cultivate when you approach something like this, like, and I give you a note that, like, let's make this weirder. Uh, and I was so glad that you were like, okay, let's do this thing. Like, just, there was no pushback at all. I was like, you got it. How do you cultivate a level of weirdness in your work? Just like, and the creativity that it requires to be like, oh, I can make this weirder. Let's do this thing. Because I feel like a lot of people might be like, ooh, like how, like weirder how, but you just went right for it. So, what do you think goes into making yourself just creative in a way that you could be like, yeah, let's try this and this? Is there any, like prep work that you do, or like specific inspiration stuff, or where do you draw on? Do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think my default mode when I first put something down is to play it a little safe. But I want things to have kind of like a punk rock or a weird surreal edge to them.
Yeah,
Um, without crossing the line of becoming like gross or offensive. So that's kind of the line I'm trying to walk. And so frequently with my own work, I'll put something down and feel like, no, that's too vanilla, that's too boring. Let me iterate on it and see how I can just push this in a more like surprising direction. And so definitely, the inspirations I mentioned earlier, like I'll look at Miyazaki films, or I'll look at other artists that I like who I feel like are doing stuff that feels really cutting edge and bizarre and avant-garde. And just see like, well, how are they doing it, and how can I incorporate what they're doing into my own work.
that's cool. Yeah, I do pretty much the same thing with critical listening. Just like, let's go listen
Hmm.
to something really weird and just like go under the hood and sort of see why is that so weird? Like, is there something uh, with the sounds, or is it with the form? Or, and I imagine it's sort of the same thing. Like, are the eyes doing something specific, or is it like a body language thing? Or yeah, that's cool. That
Yeah.
tracks with me. Um,
Cool.
and then the other thing that, just to go back to the film composing analogy, um, that I've kind of been building because I can relate to that. The other thing that you did was you picked up on subtle cues in the song and then reflected them in the video in a way that I thought was very subtle and clever. Like, like I gave you no note about having a white background on him at times, but I feel like it's so, just intuitively conveys the idea of tuning everything out when you're looking at your phone. And just little things like that, like when the word mirror happens, you mirrored it in the actual video. Here, I can actually pull that up so people have any idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I definitely, when I work on a music video, I try to dive into the lyrics and think about what the themes are. And in this case, there's a clear message, so it wasn't too hard to dig into that. A very relatable message as
Sure.
well, as I'm sure people have told you. Um,
Hope so.
and so yeah, that's one part of it, is just thinking about the themes and how do I visually represent it. And then the other part is what we were talking about earlier, is, well, I've got to fill this time, so how can I make this scene look different here than it looked earlier.
Sure.
And so I don't even remember, with fading out the background, I can't remember which side of that coin it was on, if it was an intentional thematic choice, which you're kindly giving me credit for, or it might have just been like, well, it'll look different if the background is gone, so let's try that.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I saw and I was like, I can tell that this would be easier than like changing the background in some way just to have white because it's, it's just white. But I just felt like, oh, it's perfect. Like, it's so clever.
Yeah.
The whole everything fades away because you're only looking at your phone, and then not long after that, I think it just cuts between the white background and like the phone getting angrier and his eye twitching, and then the
Yeah.
explosive red scene. So it's very like white background, orange background, white background, red background. Like, you really feel the intensity growing. Yeah, I thought all that was very
Yeah.
clever.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, and the whole idea of the phone being this like monstrous antagonistic force is interesting. It reminds me of because you had that idea going into it, and it reminds me of like old like anti-drug cartoons and stuff, right? Like teaching kids not to smoke cigarettes, and that's like, we're probably going to get those kind of videos about technology and social media, now that there's this increased awareness of the dangers of that for kids and for teenagers
Yeah.
particularly. So I feel like you're kind of ahead of the curve with that whole analogy, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be partnering in a couple of years with Concerned Children's Advertisers.
Yeah. Yeah, saying this movie will be PG-13 if you show them on their phone, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be the governing body for that. I can't wait.
Perfect.
Um, is there anything else you wanted to bring up about the video? I don't really have anything else specific to say about the video. I got a couple of more questions to kind of wrap this up, and then you can go about your day. But was there anything else you wanted that was a specific interest to you in working on it?
Yeah, let me just look at my notes. I think we probably covered it, but let's see here. Um, no, I don't think so. But it's a great song, and that makes it easy too
Thanks,
to
man.
work on. Because when I'm working on a video, I gotta listen to that thing over and over again, and it's a pleasure when it's a bop, when it's a good song.
Well, thanks, buddy. Yeah, I mean, the video, uh, I feel like for me as a creative, every time I hire anyone else creative, whether they're doing, artwork or video or other musicians to play on stuff, like my goal is for them to be like, oh, we're doing that? Okay. Just to have that little spark of, oh, this is a little different and fun. And so
Yeah,
I've always tried to move towards that. And so, my whole songwriting process over the last 2 years is like, how do I make songs that make people kind of stop and go like, oh, this is a little different and weird. Okay, I see what we're doing something different here. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed it and that it was, fun and ridiculous and weird. And I think that it comes across as a much better product uh, overall, but also the video is just super fun.
thank you. Yeah, totally. When did the next singles come out? You probably have already announced that.
No, this is sort of like it's a little ad hoc, but it's not super ad hoc. It's going to be probably every 6 to 8 weeks or so, just because of the way that like Spotify pitching works and stuff. Because we are super beholden to that. I did this other podcast
Sure.
the other day, and it's me and two other producers that kind of came up together in like the 2014 SoundCloud Future Bass era, and
Yeah.
we had a guest on this week who was Hunter Thompson, not the author, but a different author. And he used to sort of like, I don't know if he ran it, but this blog, Run the Trap, that was just like one of the biggest dance music blogs at the time. And we were all just kind of like homies with him. And so releasing music for us was literally like, we would make a track. And if we thought it was good, we would like, as soon as you finish making it, you spent 4 hours on this total. You send it to Hunter. And if he likes it, like they put it on Run the Trap and like, it just takes off and you get like 300,000 streams. But releasing music now is like, you make it and send it to mastering, and it takes like you sit on it for 2 years while you finish the album and come up with the artwork and the promo cycle and everything. And then even like
Yeah.
each individual song, like Spotify wants a chance to like pitch it to their playlisters and have it sort of sit in their environment or whatever for a little bit. And so we have to submit songs 4 to 6 weeks in advance. And so we like to have everything done 2 weeks in advance of that. So probably a new single anyway, to answer your question at extreme length, every 6 to 8 weeks.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a big process.
Yeah, it's a big, so I mean, that's why like we did this video back in June, I think. It was done at the end of June.
Yeah.
I've just been
Right.
collecting artwork and assets and making videos. Like we shot our last video in December of 2020. We shot the first video in December of 2019. Like it's been such a ridiculous process. Just so I
Yeah.
can like in between be making other promo content and TikTok and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. You don't want to work super hard on something and then you send it out there and nobody sees it. So I get the effort.
Yeah, and you don't want to like. I know that a lot of people like. Okay, we've got a song. Let's put it out in 8 weeks. Let's figure out a video and artwork and stuff. Like we wanted to have everything sort of locked and loaded, like well in advance, so we could come up with a more comprehensive plan and tie everything together. And there's a couple references that you're aware of in the video that are going to tie into later things in this project. Uh, I'll just pull this up for anyone. We got a few people watching the stream now, but I'll just pull this up. There's in the black and white background. It's like a funeral cemetery. You know what I'm talking about in the
Yeah.
video? There's a house
Right.
in the background that's going to factor into a later song. And I think I sent you the artwork for that. I sent you some other
Yeah.
artwork. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So there's like, a few things. And then at the end, somebody picked up in the comments, there's a billboard that says Lisa is watching. That's going to tie into something much, much later. That may or may not make it onto this project, but will definitely be a theme probably for a longer term thing in my career. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you because I would recommend you to anyone. I found that working with you, I've mentioned this before, but it was like, you gave us an easy to understand like budget guideline, and you gave us like tiers of how much this could cost if we did different options, and gave us a deadline, and everything was like on budget. And you gave me the video early, and me and Sarah were both like, he delivered it early. Can you imagine? So I just wanted to ask you to kind of rant a little about professionalism because I found working with you was incredibly professional, and maybe you have some uh, insightful thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to hear that it was a smooth experience on your end because that is important to me. And I think it's crucial when you're working for yourself as a freelancer to like if you're working for some corporation, I think coming in on time and under budget a lot of times is more important to them than how creative and how artistically everything is executed, because they're working on deadlines and budgets on their end, right? And you're talking about everything, all the preparation that you guys go into to make sure that things can come out on time, right?
Yeah.
That's just how industry works. That's how companies work. And so if you can't do that, then you're just not going to get hired multiple times by the same client, unless you're just incredible, unless you can,
Yeah.
unless you have the skills that it's worth it to them. But that's usually not going to be the case because there's so much competition in these jobs. There's always some other artist or some other musician that they could bring on who would do it on time and on budget. So yeah, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah. That's fairly pragmatic. I get that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you go about your life in a second, but why don't you just, what do you got coming up? What are you working on next that you're excited about in your world?
Yeah, thanks. So on grovertoons.com, that's where you'll see my comics. And then this one I mentioned earlier, Deeply Dave. The first episode is out right now, and there's going to be 5 more episodes coming out over the course of the year. So that's a pretty big long-term project that I'm investing in. And then if you're a musician or you're somebody who wants to hire me or work with me, grovertoons.com/studio is where I have my portfolio and music videos and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I love working with musicians, and I hope to get more of those kinds of jobs in the future.
Yeah. Can't recommend you enough. It was great working with you. And you've been mentioning your website, grovertoons.com. Is there anywhere else that you're maintaining like some kind of active presence? Where can people find you? Mostly just the website
Yeah,
or anywhere else?
that's it right now. That's it right
Nice.
now. I'm trying to really just drive people to that. That and the email list is the one way that you can get notified of
Yeah.
of stuff that I'm doing. So,
Simple.
um, yeah, keeping it clean.
Wicked. All right. Now that I know that, I'll just make sure that I plug your website wherever I post the thing, if it's in blogs and stuff. Cool. Is there anything else you wanted to add about anything in the video or anything?
I don't think so. But
Wicked.
thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure meeting with you and having this conversation.
Yeah, you too, man. Again, can't recommend you enough to anyone who wants to hire you. Love the video. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your weekend, man.
Hey, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
See ya.
See you.